Hello and welcome again to the 2021 National Art Education Association Women's Caucus Awards. I am Dr. Kevin Jenkins. My pronouns are he and him, and I am moderating the session along with my fellow co-president, Dr. Adedi Perez-de-Miles. And we are glad that you could join us today to celebrate the accomplishments and the recognition earned by this year's award winners.
I want to join Kevin in welcoming everyone. Each year, the Women's Caucus receives numerous award nominations of outstanding art educators submitted by their colleagues in the field. As you can imagine, this is no small task for the award committee chairs and the committee members they recruit. So we would like to take a moment to thank the award committee chairs and the committee members for their work and commitment to this endeavor. So big applause, snap, snap, snap.
After this brief overview of the awards, each presenter will share their screen for their presentation. And just one last note before we proceed, that we are recording the session and we'll make it available for later viewing. And please note in the chat if you do not wish to have your likeness in the video recording, and that way I could take your likeness out at that time. So first presented in 2009, the Maryl Fletcher de Jong Service Award is given annually to honor an individual in the field of art education who has made noteworthy service contributions to art education as an advocate of equity for women and all people who encounter injustice. This individual contributes outstanding service of community, state, national, or international significance that contributes to eliminating discriminatory gender and other stereotyping practices for individuals and groups. Nominated by Dr. Mary Stokrocki, this year's recipient is Dr. Linda Hoeptner-Poling. So snaps to Linda.
Initiated in 1999, the Kathy Connors Teaching Award honors an outstanding art teacher educator who is recognized by students, colleagues, and supervisors as someone who consistently inspires and mentors students in a collegial, collaborative, and nurturing manner. Nominated by Dr. Cynthia Bickley-Green, this year's recipient is Dr. Borim Song.
The Women's Caucus has awarded the Mary J. Rouse Award since 1979 to recognize the contributions of an early professional who has evidenced potential to make significant contributions in the art education profession. The award is given in honor of Mary J. Rouse, a highly respected and professionally active art educator whose untimely death in 1976 deeply affected the art education profession. Nominated by Dr. Keifer-Boyd, this year's recipient is Dr. Hyunji Kwon.
Since 1975, the June King McFee Award is given annually to honor an individual who has made distinguished contributions to the profession of art education and one who has brought distinction to the field through an exceptional and continuous record of achievement in scholarly writing, research, professional leadership, teaching, and community service. Nominated by Dr. Lisa Hochtritt, this year's recipient is Dr. Kryssi Staikidis. So we're now going to,
Go right ahead.
So we're now going to hear from our award winners and their nominators.
So I shall stop share at this point so that they may share themselves. So Mary, it is your turn.
How do I share me?
You share you, all right.
Do it.
Okay.
I can just start talking. Okay. I'm very proud that I nominated Linda after bowling for the Maryl Fletcher Jong Service Award. I knew Maryl Fletcher when I was a young teacher, and she'd be very proud that Linda is getting this award. Linda held a 6-year leadership position in the National Art Education Women's Caucus, which included 2 years as president, 2 years as president, and 2 years as past. In this position, she promoted a lot of issues, especially in feminism pedagogy, which she's going to tell you about. She did relocate all the women's archives, Caucus archives, to Penn State special collections while she was president. On a personal level, I have to say that Linda helped advise Cindy Bickley-Green and me through our presidency in 2020. Duties by sharing her complete Google Drive that she kept as a single president of the NAEA. It's great to have co-presidents, believe me. As Women Caucus coordinator of the awards when I was doing it, Kevin, she guided me personally through the complicated system of 5 awards, 5 chairs, 5 judges, and more than 5 categories, which can be very complicated at times. Now, she was also supported by Karen Keifer-Boyd, Sherry Klein, and Julian Dorff. So they were the co-nominators with her. And her background was incredibly extensive. I didn't even know about half the things that she did. And I want to give her more time to talk about it. So here we are. Linda, take it away. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I will stop my video and start screen sharing. All right. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. I'd like to start by saying that service does not necessarily come naturally, nor does it happen as a sole entity. It happens within a supportive network of individuals who align, question, push, and extend your values and beliefs. For these reasons, I am most grateful for these individuals. Dr. Mary Stokrocki, my nominator for the award, thank you so much for seeing value in this service. I do. Dr. Kevin Jenkins, Dr. Adeti Pérez de Miles, Dr. Cynthia Bickley-Green, and Dr. Sherry Klein. Your Women's Caucus leadership, mentorship, and collaboration are things I hold dear. Julie Dorff, for listening to my musings and sharing in my love of service. Dr. Robin Van de Zandt and Dr. Koon Hui Khan, for your supportive collegiality. Marie Bukowski, for being the kind of boss everyone deserves. Dr. Karen Keifer-Boyd, Dr. Wanda Knight, Dr. Renee Sendell, and Dr. Enid Zimmerman, for being the sage mentors that everyone deserves. Cassie Peg Kirby, Katie Mattice, Ken Ditlevson, Jenny O'Connell, Dr. Amwaba Gooden, Yvette Roberts, Jamaica Wilson, Sarah Helmick, Josh Ryder, Dr. Diane Kerr, Denise Harrison, and Dr. Elfrida Brown. You are my Kent State family of warriors fighting to achieve social justice at Kent State in every way possible. Gretchen Hazel, for wisdom unparalleled when it comes to our elders. The Kent State NAEA student chapter and all my students who often help on my volunteer adventures. And thank you to my daughter, Jess, who proudly wears the banner of social justice warrior alongside me. You all have empowered me in one way or another to make decisions of impact that have carved out my service identity within higher education circles and beyond. And to Maryl Fletcher de Jong, a past president of the Women's Caucus and deeply treasured Ohio art educator who did a stunning amount of service. It is dizzying to recount her many gifts bestowed on our field before her untimely death. and the legacy she left to the Women's Caucus. And congratulations to my fellow awardees, Dr. Borim Song, Dr. Hyunji Kwon, and Dr. Kryssi Staikidis. You have my deepest respect and admiration for all that you do within and outside of the Women's Caucus. So at some point, I heard a mindfulness quote around the idea of shoulding. I should have done this. I should have really be doing more of that. It was around 2016 when I stopped shoulding all over myself. I stopped listening in large part to expectations of others and started to honor what I wanted to do. When it came to chipping away at some limited notions of what the ivory tower tropes were constantly nagging me about when it came to my imperfect awareness in my subconsciousness of my service roles. I knew it was a precarious balance of scholarship and service that I was trying to achieve, a balance that I very much still do try to achieve. Prior to 2016, I did plenty of service, more than I wanted. An early mentor guided me to get involved in as many university level committees as possible. He stated that it will look great on my tenure application. Worst advice ever. I was in a largely mind-numbing spiral of service that had little personal connection to me, sucking my bandwidth I now regret giving away. I'm thrilled that I now work for a director who genuinely listens to faculty concerns about being stretched too thin and who helps junior faculty in particular articulate their service focus so that it aligns with their interest and time given their trajectory to achieving tenure and promotion. I still find that being a good committee member leads to more committee membership requests. We all know the productive, always on it people who make things happen and follow through, making the work of others on the committees less cumbersome. So many requests for my time to serve on committees still come in. While important, most did not and do not mean all that much to me deeply. Combine that with my inability to firmly and assertively say no in a way that I meant it. I hear you, Marie. And I was over-serviced. I've since learned the trick of responding to such requests with informing the requester of my service obligations currently. And if they wanted to help release me from one of them, I'd be happy to join their committee. And this tactic has served me well for the most part. So on occasion, I have conversations with close friends about our own deaths. If we were to die tomorrow, would we be shooting ourselves on our deathbeds? I was speaking to Christine Gorbach, a W.C. Carrie Nordland Award winner and a dear friend who passed in 2018, right before the fall semester started, a week before she collapsed of an aneurysm. She set me straight about not having done enough, that we both led lives that have meaning because of the work we do in service of others. A fierce feminist herself, she was a fellow woman who empowers others. We both agreed we were satisfied with our life overall, that we had indeed done enough. The fact is that I am at peace with not being the most published scholar in my field. So in 2016, I was fortunate enough to be a Provost Faculty Associate for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Kent State. My dean and director adjusted my course load for 2 years so that I could focus on initiatives deeply important to me, all related to service. Shooting all over myself came to an abrupt end. I reimagined what a professor's life could be when they do service in a way that aligns with their values. It was the support I wish all my colleagues could have. I'll briefly describe the service I did and how it carved out the way for service that I do now. The pandemic has certainly made us all pivot, and so did my service. Some of it is amped up, while some of it has paused. So service intersecting voice and voicing, social justice and activism, and wellness. Many of the events that I organized were designed to be drop-in, requiring no experience in art making. Getting out of the headspace of my school, while a wonderful place, and physically out of the building was really good for me. So for example, I became a Green Dot lead educator, giving me the privilege to teach others at Kent State vital bystander strategies when confronted with or witness to sexual assault or power-based personal violence. I love teaching anyone who will listen how to disrupt and prevent what is a ubiquitous problem on our campuses. Related, I created and teach the Art Making for Wellness group more than words can say through our Sexual and Relationship Support Services Center, which meets monthly during the academic year. The group is comprised of student survivors of sexual assault and power-based personal violence and their allies, and together we share a meal and make art that requires no prior art experience. Being the proactive and active upstander against sexual assault and power-based personal violence is important at Kent State. So too is self-expression and creative thinking, facets of what makes life worth living and primary missions of my service at Kent State. Similarly, I serve an often marginalized population on campus by teaching monthly art making at the LGBTQ+ Center and serve on the center's action team. Through the Women's Center Action Council, I collaborate on initiatives that ensure menstrual equity on campus, equitable access to lactation rooms, and salary disparities by race and gender. Working to address the needs of students, staff, administration, and faculty, the Parenting Student Task Force, of which I'm one of only 2 faculty members, and the Quality of Faculty Work-Life Committee I co-chair, we are working furiously to make Kent State a supportive environment for anyone assuming caregiving roles of minor children. I also nurture the service-mindedness of my students. I launched the volunteer teaching of art at Miller Community House, the only homeless shelter in our county. Together, my students and I provide a much-needed pause to residents experiencing high levels of stress and stretched bandwidth due to their homelessness. Covering many Friday sessions alone, including in the summer, I taught the residents a series of self-exploratory and empowering art-making strategies. I'll never forget the moment a little girl put her creation in her mother's basket for her birthday, excited that she had a present for her. Other events like the social justice Sip and Paint, I witnessed incredible times of voicing in our community. Also propelled by my mother's struggle with dementia, I dove deep into understanding creativity and aging. I led volunteer teaching of art at area facilities spanning 3 counties for residents experiencing Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia, many of whom were in hospice care. These incredibly powerful outreach opportunities for me and our students forged intergenerational connections and a heightened sense of empathy. Art is a human right indeed that all should and can have access to, and not only the abled and privileged. So service as leadership. So while president of the Women's Caucus from 16 to 18, I supported the aims of members to explore a more intersectional and inclusive form of feminism, moving beyond the whiteness, what I had hoped, prevalent in the 60s and 70s second wave feminism. While there is much more work to be done, critical conversations and dialogues begun by the wonderful previous WC leaders were continued during my term and were often contentious and very painful due to differing experiences and perspectives. This is evidence of growth and development and builds on the voices of many. I navigated a contentious time for the caucus that threatened to fracture alignment of members and WC board members. I know our current board is working to engage and ignite members through critical conversations focused on the mission of the Women's Caucus. I am not at peace with some of the tensions, divides, conflicts, bias, inaccuracies, and misconceptions swirling around the Women's Caucus that have manifested recently, and I'm grateful for this current board's brave leadership. Allies becoming non-allies are shattering moments for me that build into misunderstandings I continue to work through. The words and actions of a few, I learned, can have a devastating effect on the many. So service is also well-being. It empowers others in making art and voicing. It is a form of well-being for me. I'd rather facilitate learning and engagement through art than make it myself. As a faculty member, I actively work to inspire fellow faculty and staff to enact social change education, social justice education, and all we do in daily practices that reflect anti-racism and gender equity. I find it vital to teach and share with others culturally relevant pedagogical strategies and cultural humility, how to recognize and disrupt microaggressions, micro-insults, micro-assaults, how to enact trauma-informed teaching practices, how to be inclusive through universal design principles, and how to be both an ally and advocate for LGBTQ+ individuals, acknowledging that I do these things cognizant of my own white cisgender privilege. And let's not forget that service is a form of kindness. Dr. Piero Ferrucci, in his 2007 work, The Power of Kindness, has centered and cemented my belief that being nice and kind mean a whole hell of a lot. Being kind is not a luxury or a sign of weakness. It is a source of strength that unifies and builds community and is indeed needed for survival. Service is a central tenet of Dr. Ferrucci's assertions of what it means to be kind. Being a caregiver professor comes in many forms, including how we show care for our students and communities, and is necessary for the livelihood of higher education. So this year I served in the role of co-chair, and I continue to do so, of the Policies and Procedures Subcommittee of Kent State's Anti-Racism Task Force, leading a group of 15 students, staff, faculty, and administration in identifying and rectifying barriers to success rooted in biased and discriminatory policies and procedures. The work is really hard. Good service often is. Lifting and amplifying the voices of Kent State's Black faculty, staff, students, and administrators, and working on restorative justice are of primary importance, as my co-chair Jamika Wilson and I work hard as hell to deepen efforts to make Kent State an anti-racism institution, examining the ways that racism, particularly anti-Black racism, exist and persist on our campuses and how to correct those ways. We know that diversity hinges on differences, that equity welcomes everyone, and that inclusion makes it possible for everyone to succeed with the resources they need to do so. Without one of these three factors, justice is not possible. All three are needed. And finally, service is a form of scholarship. It is widely known that women lead men in service activities in higher education. If we describe it as bearing the brunt of service roles, or it's just the way it is, we disempower those women. Feminists, and especially Black feminists, have known the value of service in higher education all along and are disproportionately asked to assume roles of service at their institutions. What if we instead interrogate and dismantle hierarchical notions of scholarship, disrupting the way it is undervalued within an intersectional feminist lens? What if service was valued alongside publications and creative activity equally? I imagine a time for my daughter and son when this will be a reality. Let's cement it as such and value those who are out there making a difference. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Linda. That was amazing.
Thank you.
I'm not crying. Yes, I am. I'm not ashamed to cry. Wow. Thank you, Linda. That was amazing. Sorry. Next up on our list is for the Kathy Connors Teaching Award. So Cynthia, if you would like to share with us.
All right. So, I don't know if I'm going to be able to advance.
It looks like, Cynthia, it looks like you may be able to, when you hover over on the bottom left, there's some there's some icons that come up and there's a back and forth arrows. So maybe it's through that.
There, I got it. Okay, so so this is for Borim song, and I nominated her for the Kathy Connors Teaching Award. In regard to the purpose of NAEA, I think that Borim has advocated for the equity for women and all people who encounter justice. And she has also worked to eliminate discriminatory gender and other stereotyping practices for individuals and groups and so forth, and for the concerns of women. But this presentation really is going to focus on her visual of her and sort of trace her from being a freshman in college in 1993 through her childhood. And we're looking at her, all of these years have been spent in Korea. But her father, I think, has always been a factor in moving people from wherever they are to other locations. Here's the family group taking a trip to Hawaii. All right. And then she did get a BFA in studio art from Seoul Women's University. And I think that we're going to see in these images how she takes her father's idea and lives it. All right. So here's another picture of her doing her undergraduate work. And so forth. And this is one I want to focus on a lot. Here she's looking at feet and doing kind of a thoughtful consideration of dancing, maybe of bones and so forth. Okay. Here's some other exploratory ideas about who she is as a person. And I'm reading into this, but that's what I'm thinking. And then she's teaching art at Shindo Elementary School in Seoul. All right. And then she goes on and gets her studio degree. And here her feet start to be much more realistic. So if we're thinking about her art as an exploration of personality, now she's focusing on where her feet can take her, or at least focusing on her feet. Move on. Those are photographic, digital, and so forth. We'll go to the next one. Different lights and darks, and certainly a kind of abstraction. The abstract qualities. And so where are her feet going to take her? So she's moving to New York City, and where she studied at Columbia University and got a master's degree in education on top of that master's degree in studio art. and then her doctorate in education. All right. There she's receiving her hood, but the feet still show up here. All right. But this time they're sort of ground, well, they're certainly at a position touching the earth. This is a metaphor, of course. Then she's looking at the sidewalk, and sorry, the feet sort of in the gum of the sidewalk. But by now she has a family and a son, Alex, and a husband. And she she's entering her professional career. Here's Alex sort of grown up here. And she starts to write about, and she explores. So we've watched her through the personal work of her artwork, but she's doing an intellectual thing at the same time. So she's trying to find how do we transcend those cultural boundaries and ethnic borders. So this is one of her. Actually, this was in the Globalization, Art and Education book. She maintained a strong tradition to her Korean background, and actually has written for Korean publications, and she feels a need to share those the two cultures that she's experienced as education through her education and her pedagogy. She works certainly in the community with various communities. She's worked with women's groups. She's gotten grants for women, working with women who have young mothers, who are young mothers, in her Engagement and Outreach Scholars Academy. And she, in order to give them more self-understanding. She does the Korean school in North Carolina and provides an opportunity for ECU students to experience the diversity of the children who are attending that school. I'm sorry, I think I said that incorrectly. It gives our students a chance to experience the diversity of the children in the school. When she was in New York, she worked at the Metropolitan Museum, so she has a great interest in Korean artists and how they're developing their sensibilities. Here she is with our students. She's active. She's a very active teacher, and she participates in all of the all of the activities that our pre-service teachers do. This is at a conference, a North Carolina Art Education Association conference on a break. Here they are doing a lot of activities, again at a conference. She managed to teach all of us, the faculty, about Korea when in 2017, when we went to Daegu for the International INSEA, International Society for Education Through Art conference. But she and Nan Young organized a trip for all of us to meet people in Seoul at her university. And then there was a whole set of activities that gave us experience with Korean culture that we would not have been able to work on ourselves or work out ourselves.
Cynthia, I'm going to have to interrupt you a little bit. I think we're running a little bit long. Could we go ahead and move on to?
So she's always willing to go to museums. Here she's presenting in Daegu. She's an incredibly gracious person. I wanted to see traditional Korean painting, so we went to a traditional Korean store. And thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And we're going to hear from Borim.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great.
Okay, great. So I think our session is till 2:53. Sorry, kind of just go very quickly and then we, I will do that. So thank you so much. And it's such an honor to be a recipient of this wonderful teaching award. I am so grateful for everybody here and then everybody who has supported me. And then Cynthia, it was such a generous and sweet introduction. I really, really appreciate it. You just worked so hard on that. You are so generous. Thank you very much. So let me go through. Yeah, you just saw this photo. This is my only child period. After that year, I had sister and another one and another one and another siblings. I have 4 siblings, 3 sisters and 1 brother. And from my childhood, when I was in elementary school, I was always very, very interested in the visual arts, but I was never really good. Particularly when we go out to art competition, I never won any award, but I was really into it. I always wanted to be an artist. So I went to arts high school. It's a special school for the arts, art, music, and dance. And then that was very much skill-focused training and technique-based education. And when I went to college, my professor claimed, okay, guys, throw away all the skills and techniques you have learned so far. Now, without all of those, you should be creative. You find your own idea, what you want to do inside yourself, find your way as an artist. So I was really struggling with that idea. This is in Spain, Gaudi, some San Familia church. And then I learned about the value of collaboration. This is a chocolate box with my images and all these artworks. And then I got into feed, the topic I've been interested for a long time. And then I started teaching, and then I went to New York. And this is my image, my self-portrait with the gum spots on the New York subway station on the floor. When I went to New York City, I realized I don't want to just use my cultural identity because that's the only way I can survive in this country, in the United States and New York. I don't think it's fair. Then I learned a lot about, multicultural education, cross-cultural education, and then cultural identity, diversity, and the benefits of all these cultural contexts students can get. So I was so lucky to have Dr. Graham Sullivan. Kryssi was my, our teacher in the studio course, and then also fortunate to go to the school. And I got really into digital art practice and how we can promote more understanding of cultural identity, self-identity during the digital-based art practices. And then Dr. Graham Sullivan, my advisor, my mentor, and my role model. And then he said, 2000, 21 years old, he said, the internet is not a tool, it is a place. I didn't really understand what he meant at the time. And then a few years later, internet brought us different kinds of communities. So really, he shifted my understanding of our culture and society and what we could do as an art educator and artist. And then he also focused on the difference between self-reflexivity and reflection. Self-reflexivity focuses on changing. Borim, you need to make a change after you reflect. And then he also said, writing is a core. You should be very, very core. You should be very astute. Okay, and then he always said yes to me when I asked for something as an international student. So I learned a lot from him how we interact with the students. So I went to East Carolina University, and then here are my students. Okay, my advisor said, Borim, you don't say my students because they don't belong to you. Okay, so I think that kind of respect and how we interact with our students, those students. All right, so these are my, these students' artworks in response to COVID-19. They created last semester. And you can see this, virus in between people, while they're talking. And then teaching, research, service, always interrelated, interwoven. So first, multiculturalism, cross-culturalism, intercultural movements, diversity, and identity. Particularly, I'm very interested, as you said, they're very interested in how we can incorporate contemporary art into K-12 curriculum. And this is my online teaching strategy. I've been teaching online for 13 years now. I am so fortunate for that because my university, ECU, has been very much a frontier for that part. So my students work, they record themselves, making art. This is how we kind of build a multi-layered feedback for art making of our students in a virtual classroom. So based on my research, we made this, the infographic about how we can communicate effectively with our students. Community-based art education. And this is Korean school. And I also did the research project for teenagers who are young mothers in a school, in a high school setting. And then, so interest in like a social justice for underserved populations has been very strong in my work as a teacher, researcher, and service doer. And the arts integration of the topic I've been very interested. We got interdisciplinary grants for art and math and contemporary arts Here is Atta Kim's photography. I was, very lucky to really write about his work in a book chapter. And then here we come, international collaborations. And then I learned about servant leadership, follower leadership, transformative leadership. My father said, good leaders are who listen to other people. So I've been following his advice, and then here's my family, always very supportive. And of course, it's all thanks to my students who are so hard worker, such as Jong. And then I feel so fortunate to work for our institution, and then it has been joy for just working as an exhibition coordinator of a women's caucus for the past 3 years. And then thank you all for all your work. And then I am so honored. And then this award will give me a really good opportunity to really reflect on what I have been doing and then for my future as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Borim. I absolutely love the artwork and the collaborations with students. Just fabulous. The next group of presenters are for the Rouse Award, and nominated by Dr. Karen Keifer-Boyd. This year's recipient is Dr. Hyunji Kwon. So we're going to turn it over to them.
Well, it is my heartfelt pleasure to introduce Dr. Hyunji Kwon, Assistant Professor of Art Education and affiliate of Women's and Gender Sexuality Studies, or actually it's Women's and Gender Studies at the University of South Carolina. The other title is what we have here at Penn State. And as an early professional, which is what the Rouse Award is about, but Hyunji has already made significant contributions in the art education profession and well beyond. Congratulations, Dr. Hyunji Kwon, on receiving the prestigious NAEA Women's Caucus Mary J. Rouse Award and on the birth of Asher Kwon Ostic, who is today 1 week old. Woohoo! I had the privilege of serving as chair of Hyunji Kwon's dissertation committee. Her dissertation titled Performing, Witnessing Art, Sexual Trauma, and Feminist Pedagogy focused on feminist art pedagogy as a means by which to expose, examine, and bear witness to the trauma of sexual violence. Hyunji Kwon's performative writing, narrative inquiry, and visual mapping methodologies for her dissertation has been further developed in her teaching and research in South Africa, Argentina, locally in Columbia, South Carolina, and virtually, such as this morning in a body mapping workshop as part of a feminist interdisciplinary conference organized by graduate students at Penn State. You are amazing, Hyunji. Can you just, this is this morning and a week old baby. Okay, Dr. Hyunji Kwon's compassion and research work ethics has brought remarkable depth and theoretical insight in developing affect methodologies in both academic writing and visual art education. Hyunji Kwon's transnational research is significant to trauma affect scholarship at the intersections of art education and women's gender and sexuality studies. It is with great honor to nominate Hyunji Kwon for the Rouse Award. And I'd like to share just a few excerpts from her 3 letters of support. From Dr. Rosemary Jolly, professor of the Weiss Chair of the Humanities in Literature and Human Rights at Penn State, writes, Hyunji implicates herself as a witness to an enabler of arts-making healing practices in highly vulnerable communities. When this work has been exhausting and different members of our team have had waves of momentary exhaustion, Hyunji has never wavered. Hyunji is a brilliant, courageous, resilient, phenomenally determined researcher and teacher, end quotes. From Olga Ivaskovich, Associate Professor of Art Education at the University of South Carolina, she writes about Hyunji. She is prolific and her research is cutting edge scholarship. And she is also making profound and deeply meaningful impact on the lives of disenfranchised women in our local Columbia University community. And Dr. Borim Song, who not only got an award, but wrote this wonderful letter, as you met, Associate Professor of Art Education at East Carolina University. She writes, in line with her scholarship, Dr. Kwon has contributed to local and global communities by providing several series of art workshops to vulnerable populations at different sites. The participants included sexual violence survivors and women living in shelters who have experienced sexual violence along with other forms of oppression. She has curated and displayed these participants' artworks at a local gallery, highlighting the multi-layered identities of previously silenced groups. I'm going to paste some links in the chat for videos of participatory art performance directed by Hyunji Kwon that you could look at later. And with that, I want to again congratulate Dr. Kwon. I'm so proud of you, Hyunji, and look forward to your presentation.
Okay, so can you hear me? Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so it's such a great honor to receive this award. As a junior researcher in the field, several years back, I saw the list of recipients of this very award and truly hope that I'll be listed as a recipient in the future. I want to express my gratitude to Dr. Karen Keifer-Boyd, Dr. Olga Ivashkevich, Dr. Borim Song, and Dr. Rosemary Jolie to trust in me and nominate for this award. And also appreciate Women's Caucus Award Committee, as well as Dr. Kevin Jenkins and Dr. Aditi Perez de Miles for believing the potential of me to contribute to art education through research. There are three different parts I want to share today. The first is brief background, and second is research project, and the third one is my future research project. I'm a descendant of North Korean refugees. That means my half of family is from North Korea, another half is from South Korea. I grew up witnessing a familiar conflict between North Korean refugees and non-refugees. Also, I grew up in a Confucian country where female are considered the second citizens. Inequality was pervasive and the questions were left unanswered. I was only exposed to feminist theory after moving to the US when lifelong questions began to be answered and my body and mind began to reflect on these changes. Yet I'm a Korean immigrant who came to the US as an adult and Asian woman living in the South. I consider my positionality as a perpetual outsider who does not have a deep root in any places, yet I'm the one who tries to understand and try to feel the sense of place and sense of belonging through research on place, people, and memory in order to contribute to art education. My research project began with my personal trauma and performative autoethnography for witnessing. It was not an easy journey to embark on, but my advisor, Karen Keifer-Boyd's unlimited support made it possible. Since then, my personal trauma and position as a perpetual outsider has expanded to many research projects that seem very different, but which also share many similarities. My research has been about, but not limited to, critical and feminist pedagogy, critical global art education, community-based art education, historical research, and ethics of care. These images are a few images from my research projects that have been published or accepted for publications. Instead of going over individual research projects, I just want to share a few selective key subjects for my research. The very first subject to share is comfort women. As you see the description there, comfort women were forced sex slaves for the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II, and they were mostly Korean and numbered from 80,000 to 200,000. One former Korean comfort woman, Dok Young Kang, wished to be married, properly buried, and remembered. So this is the shrine I created as a combination of wedding and funeral rituals for her. This shrine was created in Keifer-Boyd's class, and I also created a performance series about it. Because Dr. Kang left several paintings about her experience, I really believe in the power of her art. This is the performance I created. So I partook in a wedding ceremony on Kang's behalf to fulfill her desire to be married. This performance piece I focused on, I wrote a book chapter about it, and then performance autoethnography became part of my dissertation, as well as other manuscripts published in Visual Culture and Gender. In the same class, Keifer-Boyd's class, I also created this map called Former Comfort Woman Dr. Kang's Life. Beginning in 1929, this map navigates her life trajectory chronologically, along with the artworks she created. The user can choose and explore locations, paintings, and narratives in non-conventional order. I wrote a book chapter about this media map, where Dr. Olga Ivashkevich and then Michelle Dimitriadis edited. And this media map, I focused on how history allows map users to be nomadic subjects in terms of critical thinking. I published this map on Google Map, and then one curator in LA saw this map and contacted me that he wanted to use this map as part of Comfort Women exhibition. I revised this map and then fixed some issues, and this one was published in an exhibition. And then curator and I continued the conversation about Comfort Women and other focuses of our life, and it turns out that he is also a descendant of survivors of Armenian genocide. And we were connected in terms of how art generates sense of traumatic history, and trauma, in fact, inherits to generations after. This conversation sparked another research interest in me in terms of how historical traumas are similar and how we inherited this trauma and how art can actually make sense out of it. So I wrote another book chapter about this historical traumas. My second subject I want to share is embodiment. Embodiment indicates visceral, felt, and enlivened experiences in and with the world. I'm interested in how visual embodiment in the form of body map embraces and increases memory and the ways one inhabits the world with the differences. Such an approach not only applies to a person's or collective traumas, but even teaching experiences. I use this approach not only in academic terms, but in my classes as well as in community outreach programs. I wrote another manuscript on body map and embodiment, which is under review now. The images you are looking at were created by my student teachers, and our focus was actually on teacher identity and how art, the relationship between art and their bodies. But then, as you can see, the way they embody their experience as a teacher and art through their body and with their body is significantly different and amazing. This was created by one sexual violence survivor on campus. Although I used a similar approach, the body maps are just very different. And you can see that even though she wanted to focus on sexual violence, her presence in the world is just merely a human being, not a sexual violence survivor. She doesn't want to focus on that part. This was created by one violence survivor poet in South Africa. Because she was Asian descendant living in South Africa, Muslim, and a violence survivor, her body map embodies a wide range of different experiences, religion, and her childbirth, and the death in her family, and other issues. Embodiment is not a new concept, but I just want to explicably examine the role of art in embodying memory, place, and experience. My third subject that I want to share is instructional resources for our teachers. While not directly relating to my previous subject, I always share my teaching methods that could stimulate my student teachers and other art teachers' thoughts. In this direction, I have published on the subject of visual culture, particularly graphic novels, virtual reality, and online teaching. Online teaching piece was co-authored with the Dr. Borim song. And the one you're looking at is about mental illness. And this one was about teacher identity and also whether feminism is for men as well. The pieces that I'm sharing right now was published in the journal Art Education. And then I also wanted to explore some virtual reality with my students in a very affordable and approachable ways, because a lot of my students are familiar with it or not familiar with it, and they're really scared of using this technology. So I combined handmade art portrait with the augmented reality, and they created this great app showing endangered animals in the world. Another thing is this 360-degree cameras, and just the reason why I want to use those cameras is because of the sense of place, how it's delivered very well to students without physically being there. This is really about just third sight pedagogy. Next part is how I will move forward. My research projects have been diversified and went into many different directions, but then the first one, community-based art education, I really want to continue to serve the community. This one, because I live in the South and Colombia has a very high population of African-American populations, and then a lot of shelters women are African Americans, and they when it comes to identity, of course, African American identity is not is something that has to be addressed and discussed, and then you can see several like concepts they came up with. Because a lot of women are previously incarcerated, addicted, and struggled with the mental illness issues, and then substance abuse, and alienated from family. Again, the family and body memory are always the center of my community art projects. Left one is about their poem about the family, and the right one is one woman's body map. See how different the body maps are, because she didn't want to put her face and other body parts, and her hands are tied. Another community site was the sexual violence survivors, and I just wanted to share this because she was very she labeled herself as a feminist, so that's why I wanted to share this work. And then the top part, when the paper is folded, you can see the activism word, but when the paper is unfolded, you can see that her identity as a feminist can be fragile because she just wants to run away and then could not deal with her crisis very well. This is the community exhibition I curated, and I curated this works from my participants and my students' participants as well. And this is also from the children living in the shelter, because one shelter we've worked with hosted mothers and their children. So it's really good to have adult class as well as the children's class. Another direction I want to delve further into is indigenous decolonial aesthetics. When I facilitated this workshop in Argentina, there were violence survivor poets, but one woman was a witchy woman, which is an indigenous community in Argentina. Her approach to body map was significantly different from many participants I've worked in the Western context. She took indigenous and anthropocentric approach, non-anthropocentric approach to her body and memory. She did not prioritize her body, but to simply locate her body alongside many entities in the world, such as animals, plants, and artifacts created by plants. It was almost shocking to me and felt that quite similar to new materialism in a Western context, but I cannot place new materialism alongside indigenous decolonial aesthetics. So that's something I really want to go further. Other projects that are ongoing with the different funding resources include mixed methodologies, K through 16 curricular resources. For this, I sent out nationwide survey to K through 16 art educators to learn about the curricular resources they produce, obtain, and circulate to see if there are strong connection between higher education and K through 12 art educators. Another project I'm currently working on is about transgressive hybridity of Black girls in the South. It's very interesting to see that many Black girls really like Korean popular culture. And this sort of like a dynamic and new interconnection between Black girls and Korean popular culture dismantles white and Black binary, because Asian is often affiliated with white instead of Black, but then Black fans really like this Asian culture. So that's something that I'm currently working on as well. Thank you for listening. That was my presentation.
Thank you very much. It is fantastic to see the scope and breadth of the trajectory of your scholarship, as well as the really exciting work that you're doing with arts-based research in relationship to the community. And of course, you know, not only locally, but internationally. So congratulations. We are going to move on to the June King McFee Award. And this was nominated by Dr. Lisa Hochtritt, and this year's recipient is Dr. Kryssi Staikidis. So we're going to turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. This is so exciting to see your smiling faces. I have just a few minutes to introduce Kryssi, and I also have some words from the supporters, that letters of nomination that supported Kryssi's nomination. It's going to be a great start. So thanks to you all for being here today. I'm Lisa Hochtritt, and I'm the program director of the Master of Arts in Teaching program at the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore, Maryland. I have the great pleasure today to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Dr. Kryssi Staikidis, in the gorgeous fuchsia in one of your corners. So Kryssi is currently a professor at Northern Illinois University. I've known Kryssi for over 20-something years when we were both studying at Teachers College at the very same time. So really long time ago. In this short introduction, I can't share with you all that she's accomplished, but just to put some numbers on some things, she's presented 90 times at conferences and symposia, 100 times to lectures in classes and invited lectures, 2 books, and dozens of articles and chapters. So she has really contributed to the field in such immense ways. We invited the following scholars who Kryssi holds in extremely high esteem to contribute letters of support for her nomination. So Dr. Christine Ballingy-Morris, Dr. Elizabeth Garber, and Dr. Karen Keifer-Boyd. Karen emphasizes in her letter that this award is considered one of the most prestigious awards in the field of art education by her and many other feminist art education scholars. It's really a really big deal, and we're so happy that Kryssi was selected as this year's recipient. In the remaining few minutes, I'd like to share some of the words from Kryssi's nomination and letters of support, and in the end, point out some similarities between the letters that I heard over and over again echoed in these letters. So as Dr. Karen Keifer-Boyd wrote, Karen, thank you. I didn't tell you I was going to use your words, so I just chose a couple of paragraphs to share. It was lovely written, so thank you for letting me do this. Dr. Kryssi Staikidis stands out among art education scholars and educators for her significant contributions to developing culturally sensitive and ethical research methodologies in working with and learning from Mayan women artists. Karen continues, I know firsthand the depth of the reflective ethical questioning that Dr. Staikidis has brought to her research, her presentations, and NAEA caucuses, as well as the personal exchanges in which she models self-critique, integrity, and inclusiveness, conjoined with her depth of understanding feminist and indigenous theory and praxis. Dr. Staikidis warmly embraces colleagues and students with her kind spirit and generous heart, modeling sincerity of an ethics of care in her active listening, her insightful comments and thoughtful questions. Dr. Kryssi Staikidis is most deserving to be recognized with the June King McFee Award for her lifetime work. Kryssi, are you blushing? A little bit?
Yes.
It's hard, right? It's hard. You're a very humble person, so I know it's very hard to listen to this, but these are our words from the heart. I'm going to move on to some words from Dr. Elizabeth Garber. She shares that Professor Kryssi Staikidis fits perfectly the criteria and as important, the spirit of the June King McFee Award. She is productive, focused, and yet generous in her professional associations and interactions with others. She is an outstanding teacher. I know that's something that's really important to you, Kryssi. She is one of the few people in the field of art, visual, and design education who conducts sustained ethnographic research. She not only values, but gives deeply to research and interactions with Indigenous populations. And Dr. Christine Ballingy-Morris said, her singular book, her, as in Kryssi's singular book, Artistic Mentoring as a Decolonizing Methodology, focuses on mentoring as pedagogy, immersion, epistemology perspectives, and expands the notions of ethnography. This study adds to other scholars in the field in a very significant manner by pushing the possibilities to include learner-based research. What strikes me about Professor Staikidis is her accessibility to her students. She is there for them. At conferences, she attends their presentations, as well as revealing that she helps them prepare for their presentations. Teaching is at the center of her being. Are you crying? Oh,
Well,
don't
it's
cry.
very, very nice.
Yeah. Okay, final paragraph. All of the letters stated how Kryssi is an ethical researcher. That was something that really stood out strongly to me. She's so ethical in her work. And she's also a gifted teacher who is humble and a generous colleague who cares deeply about those with whom she works. Through her sustained practice and her commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice, Dr. Kryssi Staikidis embodies the legacy of the June King McFee Award. Congratulations, Kryssi. We're really happy for you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Lisa. A lot of my ethical questioning just emerges from my own insecurity. So if that's, of any consolation to anybody, like any students of mine who are there, but I really want to thank you so much. Okay, what I'm going to do is share my screen. And hopefully, hi, everybody. So first of all, Lisa, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And I would like to really thank the Women's Caucus, NAEA. I want to thank Kevin and Deddy for all their work. I want to thank all of my mentors in art education, 3 of whom wrote that 3 3 of whom wrote letters for this award. I want to thank my life and Buddhist mentor, Daisakwi Keita. I want to thank my amazing mentors, Judith Burton and Graham Sullivan from Teachers College. And I want to thank deeply my NIU family, all the people I've worked with over the years, Doug Botten, Carrie Friedman, Shay Chow Wang, Steve Champalia, Deb Smith-Shank, and Kelly Gross, our new faculty, Connie Roten, Elizabeth Valance, all my NIU family. And then the students, well, I just loved what Borim said about the word my versus the, but I can't help using the word my. So all of the students, the generations of students, I'm not really going to speak to teaching today because we don't have, I had to really choose, and I just feel so honored to be chosen for the June King McFee Award. I bet, you know, Karen might be smiling looking at the photograph because I snuck a little view of a video that was made in 1994 by the Women's Caucus. So just, you know, the legacy of this caucus that has, you know, really fought for women's rights. And then just listening to June McFee, I was really trying to get to know her a little bit through her life. And a couple of things that really impressed me that she said were from the video. She was talking about her own religion, and she said Christian Science, and she said the whole concept of God as father, mother, and the impact of feminist theology early on had such a powerful effect in the way I treated most anything, the concepts of individual growth and opportunity, so that one doesn't accept barriers for oneself. I thought that was so beautiful. And that concept of God as father, mother just blew me away. So something else that was so beautiful, she said her husband was the greatest person because of his influence in her life. Our marriage was built upon his generosity of spirit to other people. And I thought that that was such a beautiful way to actually think about loving somebody because of their generosity of spirit. Speaking of which, want to thank my husband who is sitting next to me, ready to push the computer buttons if my hands are shaking too much. So just generosity of spirit. So thank you so much. And you know, this award is a dream come true, to be honest. I never thought in my wildest dreams. And I just want to thank so much my beautiful, amazing sister, Lisa Hochtritt, who's an incredible scholar herself. And then the 3 women who have been my sheroes. Christine Banerjee Morris, who's pioneered Indigenous studies in our field, activism, and has really paved the way, was all over my dissertation. Elizabeth Garber as well for her work in feminism and intercultural writings. And Karen Keifer-Boyd, who we all know pioneered the journal Visual Culture and Gender, has, you know, contributed in pretty much every area of scholarship in our field and has been such a lifelong mentor to me personally. So thank you so very much, everybody who contributed to supporting this. So it was a little hard for me to start, and I'm going to try to keep to a time, so I might rush through. Hence, my students, you know, will just have to be so well appreciated in their own right, in their own lives. But I'm going to speak a little bit to my background. As Wanda Knight knows, another June McFee recipient last year and a dear friend, we had a conversation about our mothers, and I learned so much from her and her relationship with her mom. And then a little bit after that, my mom passed away. Since my mom's departure, let me say, it's been a little hard for me to go into photographs. So I don't have too much autobiography here, but this was a little bit of a hard presentation for me to start. So I just started with my paintings. And that's where I'm sort of comfortable. I wanted to talk just a little bit before I go into the presentation about the fact that I started in art school, felt very sort of marginalized as a Jewish Greek, female, narrative-based painter who didn't take too well to compartmentalize skills. The empirical sort of paradigm of a patriarchal, pretty much trajectory of drawing as exercise just didn't work for me. So, you know, I left art school and went to study anthropology and art history, obviously a place of white privilege, went to Columbia University. But, you know, from the fact that my oldest and dearest friend was Malcolm X's eldest, Attallah Shabazz, I grew up with a deep sense of social justice. And my teaching in New York reified those perspectives because I saw the amount of inequity working in very economically disadvantaged neighborhoods where kids didn't get the materials they should have because for many, many different reasons. But so my teaching has always been of a social justice orientation, and coupled with, you know, those feelings of sort of being excluded in my own artwork. After university, I went and lived in Ecuador. I was really interested in looking at, and this happened in college, I did a thesis on the role of art in advanced industrialized capitalism, which was a European model as a market sort of tool, versus how it kind of manifested in more communally based cultures. When I went to Ecuador, I lived there for about 4 years. My partner at the time was Chilean. We traveled all over. We spent a lot of time in indigenous communities. And it became clear to me that the ways that I'd been taught in school didn't necessarily have to predominate. And there were other ways, cultural ways of knowing that included art making in daily life. So with that said, I'm going to talk a little bit later about the work with two Maya painters. But with that said, you know, these are a little bit of my paintings. And this is more recent, sort of my mom visiting. And I want to talk a little bit about some highlights in art education for me. So one of them was the Caucus of Social Theory. I joined that as an assistant professor, a lot of wonderful elders who had founded it, like Amy Snyder and Jan Jagodzinski and Deb and Karen and all different people that exposed me to thinking about the social justice in our field. I went on to become a senior editor for the journal. I want to, you know, Patty Bodie and I worked together, Alice Panisi, Sharif Bey, Bob Sweeney, and this was the first edition of the journal online. So being an editor in the field has really helped me. I've loved it. I've been able to really work with emerging scholars. And this was a really significant time for me. And I remember at that time saying that I loved working with young scholars who were thinking progressively about the necessary changes in our field to make it truly inclusive. And with scholars who had shaped my own work as a young scholar and who had pioneered the Caucus. So that was a really strong development in my work. Then more recently, I've been the editor of, commentary editor of studies, working with Donald O'Donoghue, which has been truly collaborative and wonderful. And two commentaries that I helped to kind of shepherd a bit were the Heart of Indigenous Research Methodologies came out in 2020, Christine Balangi-Mars, Laurie Eldridge, and then James Haywood Rowling, Paradigms Lost, with some beautiful commentaries to come as well. So editing has been a really, really important part of my service contribution to the field, and it's enabled me to really have such great hope for our field. Then something else that I've been able to really have a hand in, I feel, Christine Balangi-Mars and I edited a book called Transforming Our Practices, Indigenous Arts, Pedagogies, and Philosophies. We had 29 authors in this book. And it was our goal we asked ourselves, in a field with the unique mission of helping Budding artists, teachers, students, and researchers embrace all ways of knowing. What might we learn from Indigenous research methods, pedagogy, and contemporary art practices? And how might we approach Native cultures differently if we studied contemporary Native artists as agents of social change with important stories to tell, research as a connecting and emancipatory practice, and teaching as holistic and egalitarian? And this book included, we started it through a series of conversations, that's Christine and me, and we kind of told people how we started. We had sections on research, pedagogy, and art practice. And then what I'm most proud of is we had 12 artists, Indigenous artists, and we say, we will introduce 12 contemporary Indigenous artists who discuss the key issues and essential questions in their work. We suggest what we consider to be culturally sensitive and appropriate content for K through 12 art lessons connected to contemporary Indigenous concerns, ways of knowing, and social realities. We've tended in art education to not really teach correctly. And so we created these trans concepts that concerned the content of the artist's work, the form of the artist's work, not using the Western elements and principles or imitative design ideas, which didn't apply to the conceptual frameworks of the artists. And these are just two artists, Dylan Miner and America Meredith. And these are the ways that we broke this down. So then something else that's been really significant in my life as an artist and as a scholar has been my dear friendship with Melanie Yazzie, who has coordinated these print portfolios for Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists. And the most recent one, the most recent one is based on the year 2020. Indigenous, and so now I'm having issues with my, it's based on the idea that we think through our studio practice. Graham Sullivan, who greatly influenced my work, as Borim noted, we share the most wonderful mentor. And this portfolio really takes us through the work of studio practitioners. So this is the work, the artworks. I think what I'm gonna have to do is maybe stop sharing and reshare because my clicker is not moving forward here. So here, one sec. Can everybody see this? Okay, I'm gonna do this way. Sorry about this, but it's my computer is not behaving. So these are different prints. That was Jean Smith, and she talked about her work, different artists and their first voices as narratives. And so this has been a really beautiful way for Melanie to use her epistemology as a Dene artist. She calls it Hosho, which is walking in a good way. And so these have been a really important part of my life. And this was a beautiful healing experience because during the time of COVID, it was a really difficult time. And so to look at the ways that the artists really worked, she says, I'm communicating with these wonderful artists. I read their statements, and I think this is a great sense of invisible community. I feel that part of doing these folios is like home in that we try to reach out to people. And she says, when we were growing up, we would go to the chapter house and get bags of food for people, and we would have a big meal. And she said, these portfolios are virtual spirit food. So these have also been a real big part of my life. And now I'm going to take the next couple minutes to talk about my own work with Maya painters, Pedro Rafael Gonzalez Chavajay. This has been a life work. It's a longitudinal ethnography and recently published a book with Brill Sense, and I'm really, really excited about it. It actually covers the 20-year work that I've done with the artists. And so the book is divided into thematic sections, and Christine Ballingy Morris wrote the welcome, which was like a blessing. And I was able to work with Luke Eric Lassiter, who was one of my scholarly mentors who really partially founded the idea of collaborative ethnography, which means you go back and you work with the participants, and you go through the writing, and you go through the videos, and they tell you what they want in and they tell you what they want out. And that's really, really significant, because in 20th century anthropology, oftentimes people went into work with Indigenous communities and came out with the wrong information, which was misrepresented in the field. So relational work, start with the lives of people. This is Pedro Rafael Gonzalez Chavajay, my Tsutuhil Maya Guatemalan mentor, San Pedro La Laguna, Palani Chocumes, my Cachiquel mentor. And I went to study with both of them. They led the research, they led teaching lessons. This went back to what I had wanted to do, which was to find out if anybody was working with personal and cultural narrative, since that had just not happened for me in art school. I feel that research is personal and passionate. And so I try with my students for them to start at a place that really matters. And I learned that from Graham Sullivan as well. So this was Paola's husband, the founder of the Painting Collective. And I'm just going to talk for a couple minutes some of the things that I feel about this work that have contributed to the field. The idea of the visual as privileged, that the visual can be a didactic tool, the visual can be a site for teaching, the visual can be reflective of pedagogy, the visual can be a site for claiming history, can be evidence against atrocity, can be a platform of resistance, can lead to recognizing the beauty of culture. The visual can be a way to say what is unutterable with words. The visual can be a way to think about sharing and collaborating about the differences and the similarities of cultures. The visual can also be an embodiment of relationship, can embody something such as a grieving ritual. And so that for me has been really important, because very often in the European Academy, text has been privileged. Additionally, the visual helped for the Indigenous people that I worked with to have a say in the outcomes of the research, which is part of Linda Twice-Smith's philosophy about the importance of Indigenous research methodologies and working with Indigenous communities as a non-Indigenous person, that Indigenous people have a say in the outcome of the work. Pedro Rafael wanted me to share his rituals. Then I want to thank Karen Keifer-Boyd, who oversaw a series of articles for me in Visual Culture and Gender, where I really interrogated the ethics of my own research practice. And I would say to young ethnographers, this is really important, no matter who you work with, what kind of research you do, that you think about your own baggage when you come in. So this is how I changed the research, thinking about whose discourse was privileged, looking at representing the relationship, the actual lessons, as opposed to research about the artists. These were articles in Visual Culture and Gender, which Karen edited and helped me to really shape. So thank you so much, Karen. And these are in the book as well. There's access to these videos. I'm at 18 minutes, so I'm just going to say that I was able to write to young scholars to really help them think about their own research practice in the book by Kathy Smilin and Kathy Maraglia, Inquiry and Action, Paradigms, Methodologies, and Perspectives in Art Education Research. So part of my work has been talking to young scholars as well. And then just to say, changing my own orientation, helping to change K through 12 classrooms. And then just to conclude, the impact of relationship, lenses of life and death. That's my mom and Phyllis with Pedro Rafael and Adelina on the left, visiting San Pedro. My mom with Paula and her family in San Juan, Comalapa. The importance of the long-term work and ethnography that spans time. And I just want to say that this work has really enabled me to develop trust, friendship, care, and reciprocity. So with that, I want to say that if I could do anything to carry forth June King McFee's spirit, I hope to continue to be able to do that. And thank you so much for allowing me to share my work with you.
Kryssi, thank you so much. I admire your sustained commitment to Indigenous knowledges, and I am just so thrilled that we have researchers in the field that are taking seriously the commitment and the responsibility to think about the ethics of research. So thank you so much, and we are definitely opening it up to everyone.
Congratulations, everyone. Woohoo!
Yes, everyone. We have a couple of announcements, right, Kevin?
Yes, let me share my screen. So again, looking here at some upcoming sessions that we have. So this coming Thursday, March 4th at 11 a.m., we are presenting in Business Meeting 1, Diverse Voices in Feminisms. And in this session, we aim to provide a platform that allows for awareness and appreciation of the convergent and divergent voices and needs of the multiple and varied feminisms as experienced in the art education profession and the lives of art educators, artists, and researchers.
And yeah, there we go. So on Friday, March 5th at 11 a.m., please join us for Feminists Histories, Hindsight, Foresight, and Insight, Women's Caucus Precedents, Past, Present, and Future, and conversation with the people of all genders who mentored or inspire them, as well as individuals they have mentored or they hope to mentor in the future. We'll discuss how they look back, hindsight, how they look forward, foresight, and how they look inward, insight, in order to reflect upon how the present is never independent of the past or the future. So this session is an invitation for participations to explore the histories of feminist mentorships and collaboration across time and place that give rise to mutual respect and affordances for current generations to create inclusive bridges to participate affirmatively in the future of intersectional feminist practices. So we really hope to see you there. And yes, we have one more actually. So Kevin, you want to talk about that real quick?
Sure. So, be sure to also join us at 2 p.m. and again at 7 p.m. on Friday, March 5th for sessions moderated by our exhibition coordinator and this year's Kathy Connors Teaching Award recipient, Dr. Borim Song, as well as Aditi and myself. So
at 2 p.m. is the 2021 Women's Caucus Artist Talk with intermediate artist and educator Julie Usha Libersat. She's assistant professor of art, design, and technology at Texas Women's University. Libersat's interactive video installations, digitally fabricated sculptures, public artworks, and net art explore the ways that technology mediate our experiences, navigating and inhabiting the built environment. So we're really excited to have her as our artist panel. And then that'll be followed at 7 with the Women's Caucus exhibition artist panel. So we hope that you will join us. And once again, thank you so much for attending the Women's Caucus Award. It is just such an honor to see you all and to see the accomplishments.
thank you.
Thank you, Aditi and Kevin.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's lovely to see you. We're going to hang around if you want to hang around for a minute. If not, we will see you shortly at some other venue. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.